All right, I think we'll get started here. Welcome everyone to the uh, Senate Bill 1121 State and Local Transportation Needs Assessment. Today's meeting is going to focus on the needs, revenue, and gap analysis. And Justin, if you could go to the next slide, please, so we can just review the agenda. Yeah. So again, today's meeting is going to be focused on the needs, gap, and revenue analysis. NCE is here today to discuss a lot of the work that we've put into this part of the report and assessment. And so we'll also provide a content overview of the report prior to jumping into the analysis portion based on the extended fiscal needs survey, in addition to the other reports that we analyzed that were available to us out there. But before that, I'd like to turn it over to Justin Hall to go over some of our webinar logistics. So Justin.
Great, thank you, Francis. Welcome to the September 18th Senate Bill 1121 Local Transportation Needs Assessment Meeting. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Today's work group meeting is being held virtually so staff can hear directly from our stakeholders throughout California, allowing you to participate wherever you are. The agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov, and we will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of the screen. There are a number of language options there to choose from. For all our meetings, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout the meeting. You should see the webinar control panel likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you'll find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we open the public comment period to give the system time to acknowledge you. Staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternately, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read on your behalf. And as a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access the webinar. They should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. And please do your best to be concise. Make sure your comments add new information. And if you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Justin. Could you proceed to the next slide, please? Again, this is just a really brief overview of what the intent of Senate Bill 1121 is intended to capture. Again, the commission was identified to prepare a 10-year statewide transportation needs assessment, looking out to 2035. We are assessing the cost to operate, maintain, and grow the statewide transportation system, multimodal transportation system, consider the costs to address climate resiliency, and compare those costs against available transportation revenue. Next slide, please, Justin. Oh, sorry, next slide. I guess the webinar agenda was here. So with that, I'm actually going to turn this over to, oh no, next slide, please, Justin. So here, we're just going to briefly go over sort of the content that's within the needs assessment report. And these are just the chapter headings that we have developed thus far in our draft report. So we currently have 12 chapters identified, with the very last chapter being our policy recommendations, which have not been finalized yet. So this is what the, I guess, essentially outline of the report is looking like. Currently in the draft 2025 needs assessment, And I'm going to pause here if anyone has any questions or comments. If not, we can proceed into the next portion of the uh, meeting today. Being none, and we can, come back to any questions you may have. Next slide, please, Justin. And I'm going to turn this portion over to Linda Pierce, the principal engineer and lead from NCE for the 2025 state and local transportation needs assessment report. Linda?
Fantastic. Thank you, Francis. And we can go to the next slide, please, Justin. So this is information that we've presented in previous webinars, but this is just kind of a summary, I guess, as moving forward of what we've done to date. There was an extended needs survey sent out latter part of last year, first part of this year. It was sent to all the metropolitan planning organizations, the regional transportation planning agencies, and other counties. And the information that we requested was to identify what are the 10-year needs, what are the estimated 10-year revenues, and then certainly the status of the regional transportation plans that were associated with those needs. We did note that we're going to exclude high-speed rail and airports, not that they're not important to the statewide transportation system, but at least for the Senate Bill 1121, it was more focused on buses and commuter rail and the highways and the local roads and streets. To date, we've actually received responses from 27 associations, counties, metropolitan planning organizations. This represents about 96% of the total statewide network of roadway. But I think more importantly, it also addresses about 99% of the state population. And so we feel pretty good that we've got a good representation of the state highway needs, of the local roadway needs, certainly. There's obviously, as I go through this presentation, there's areas where we need some more expansion, but we'll kind of hit that as we go. Next slide, please, Justin. Now this graph or this table really is only a representation of some of the identified needs. In the survey, we said, hey, let's try to categorize the asset as best we can, be it local roads, be it transit, transit operations, highways, local and other active transportation needs and everything else. Well, the good thing is that we thought they were good categories, and they are good categories, but it may not necessarily be the categories that the MPOs and the RTAs call or the counties call. And so we wanted to make sure that we captured what we could, what was provided, again, minimizing some of the detailed work that would be required. And so given the categories on the left, we assigned like an asset category, trying to capture, hey, they may have provided us, a local roads and streets, but they called it something else. And so really the asset category was an attempt to minimize the number of assets that we quantified moving forward. And again, it's just, much more general categories, local roads and streets, transit, active transportation, that type of information. The next column in that table you can see is the number of responses we received. So we've gotten quite a bit of responses, obviously on local roads and streets, active transportation, transit operations. And then there's a whole bunch of other responses that we received that was only, one particular type of asset. So like I said, I truncated the table just to kind of show the more predominant responses that we received. And then that column on that the right side is really just the total needs identified for each of those responding agencies within that given asset category. So that's really all it is. Isn't really important because we tumble this all into one big number at the end, but I just really wanted to illustrate the level of detail that we had and the information that we had to work with. All right, next slide, please, Justin. So this is all that table combined together. And so here we just went by the asset category. So transit, local roads and streets, highway, rail, other, and then complete streets and active transportation. And then you can kind of see the examples of what each one of those categories or what each one of those asset classes means. So it is maintenance operations. The other category is a very large category with $56.8 billion of needs, but we really don't know exactly what those were. It was something that agencies said, hey, I don't see the category that's listed on the survey, so I'm just going to establish that as other. And so that's why that other category is quite large. Excuse me. And then the little graph on the right is really just to show what's the proportion of needs by these different assets. And so, like transit is taking up 44% of the needs. Local streets and roads is 16%. Other is 10%. Rail is 11%. Really, it's just to kind of give you a little bit more perspective of how those compare. Next slide, please, Justin. Same exact process was done on the estimated revenue projections over that 10-year period. And again, tried the sources on the left part of this table. General category is how you lump all those estimated revenues together, the number of responses, and then the total revenue we received from each of those responses. Next slide, please. And this is, again, taking it all together, combining all those different responses, categorizing it now by other local revenue sources, local and regional sales tax, state, federal, transit, and then tolls. And then again, the breakdown of what those examples would be for each one of those revenue sources, and then the total revenue from each of those source categories. And again, the graph on the right just kind of gives a little bit of a distribution, a little bit more perspective on where the main source is. And you can see that the other local revenue sources is the largest at 28%. Local sales tax, local regional sales tax, I should say, is 25%. The state is giving 24% of the estimated needs, or the estimated revenue. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. Similarly, on the state highway system, this was really just extracted from the 2023 State Highway System Management Plan. In that plan, they identify the series of assets, again, according to the state highway system. And then you can see the needs there, highways, and highway includes pavements and bridges and tunnels. Resiliency is the addressing some of the climate issues, active transportation, of course, safety, drainage, and then facilities. Caltrans or the state highway also has another category, but it's certainly at $5 billion in needs is a little bit more reasonable for what we would consider or what we'd like to see as other. And then on the table on the right is actually the revenue sources, and in this category, Caltrans actually refers to it as an investment. And so you can see that the historical SHOP, and the SHOP is the State Highway Operations and Protection Plan, is about 53.3 billion, or is 53.3 billion. Then there's a maintenance category, and then this SHOP new objectives are items that were added to the State Highway System Management Plan from the previous. So from 2019 to 2023, the new SHOP objectives were added. And the new SHOP objectives include, again, some more of the climate adaptation activities. They include the bicycle and pedestrian, and there's a couple other items that fall into that category as well. All right, next slide, please. So now getting into transit and rail, certainly there was information provided from the MPOs, the RTPAs, and the counties on their transit and rail needs. there is an effort being conducted as part of Senate Bill 125 that has put in about $5.1 billion, or was allocated, I should say, $5.1 billion to help address some of the shortfall that exists on the transit and rail side. There is a portion of this study, or portion of the Senate Bill 121. We're expecting a report by, I believe, sometime in 2025. I was thinking it was the earlier part of 2025, but might be spring. And it really will more than likely provide additional information. Certainly, what we received from the survey, the needs and the estimate of the revenue survey gives us a good start, but we think there's still some more out there that we might be able to glean that wasn't readily available for the Senate Bill 1121 effort. And then also, so again, that's more information to come, and you'll see my more information needed little text box up in the right hand corner of the slides. You'll see them again on other areas where we're looking for some additional information as well. There's a 2024, the California State Rail Plan identifies a series of needs over the next several years, over several decades. So that was identified, and certainly, as I noted, we do have some estimated needs that we decided to say, you know what, there's some other things that may be not included from the regional survey that we conducted. And so we actually did a kind of a little side study that looked at the historical spending on transit and rail, and specifically looking at vehicle replacement and the conversion of those vehicles to electric vehicles. And as we went through this process, we're kind of saying that, hey, you know, on the expenses side, so just the, you know, for stations, for, you know, facility maintenance and improvement, expansion, not so much. I think we excluded expansion. But on the expenses, it's about, you know, $33 to $38 billion of needs over the next 10 years. And within that, we also estimated, again, using information readily available on the conversion of diesel and gas vehicles to zero emission buses, zero emission, you know, like the little dial-a-ride type vans. We kind of estimated that the conversion of those vehicles to a zero emission vehicle is about $2 to $4 billion. And so we're looking at an additional $35 to $42 billion, at least on the transit and rail, the capital and operations improvements requirements, or capital and operation needs requirements, or identified needs, I should say. All right, next slide, please. All right, the tribal transportation. There's a lot of great things that we know to be true. Certainly, as far as population and number of federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes, California has the second largest number of tribes and has the largest population of Native Americans. And so, you know, giving that and knowing that they're maintaining about 930 centerline miles. And so a centerline mile is just the length of the road without any respect to the number of lanes. So just the length is 930 centerline miles that they actually are trying to maintain. And there isn't really a statewide needs assessment that's been done for the tribal roads. And so what we did as part of a study we did for Humboldt County, we took a look at a number of tribes. I think there was 5 tribes that we looked at. And these 5 tribes in Humboldt County had about 113 and a half centerline miles. The average condition, so we went out and did condition surveys, kind of counted the number of cracks, counted, you know, what the pavement looks like. And really, on average, the roads are in poor to failed condition. And we identified a 10-year need for those 113 centerline miles of about $66.5 million. If we take the large jump and say that we're going to say that all tribal roads in California are in similar poor to failed condition. And then you take that $6.65 million over that 10 years, and then you apply it to the 930 miles of roadways and tribal lands. You end up with about a $500 million of needs to bring that roadway system up into good condition over that 10-year period. So there's, and I guess what I want to emphasize here is this is just for pavement. So it doesn't address any of their bridges. It doesn't address any safety issues. Doesn't address active transportation or anything else but the pavement. And so you could probably take that number and easily double it to be able to address the other needs on the tribal lands. Next slide, please. Accessibility and mobility is another area where there is more work needed to capture what the needs are. Certainly addressing seniors, people with disabilities, veterans, and people with low income, and how that accessibility and mobility needs address each one of those categories. There are a number of dedicated funding sources. The Transportation Development Act, there's some grant programs. There's a consolidated transit service agency there's some limited funding, but there is some funding sources there. But again, we don't really have a great grasp at this time based on the information that we have of what those needs are. We know, hey, we need to be able to provide these services and provide access and abilities. Excuse me. But we just don't know if that's what the extent of that cost is. Next slide, please. All right. Then on the climate adaptation challenges and impacts, this certainly has been something in the works for quite a few years. More work again is needed to identify what those needs are. But certainly as of now, in the 2023 State Highway System Management Plan, Caltrans has identified costs to address sea level rise and storm surge. And so in that, there's about over that 10-year period, or by 2035, we should say, we're looking, I estimated it to be about $15.3 billion of needs just to address sea level rise. And then by 2100, the amount of money comes to be $56 billion, again, just to address that one aspect of climate change. There is in the 2033, or there plans to be about 1.8 billion to address the sea level rise for the 2033 10-year book from Caltrans, and so there is a plan to start addressing this. But I think what's really obvious here is that there's 1.8 billion available, but there's 14.7 billion needed by 2033. So again, a quite a large gap in the need, again, just on sea level rise. Adding in minimizing the impact of wildfires and safe routes, safe evacuation routes, all that is certainly identified as a need. We just haven't been able to quantify what those costs are. On the revenue side for climate adaptation, there is a Protect that is run through the federal government. And at least for now, there's a $630 million for California over the next 5 years. And then there are other funding sources that are available through competitive grants. But again, no dedicated funding, but a whole lot of needs. Next slide, please. We did a pretty extensive review of existing studies that address or that identify the revenue impacts of zero emission vehicles. And the report goes into much more detail, and certainly there's links everywhere so that if you wanted to actually dive in and to look at any one of these studies, it's available. So this is really just a one screen capture of a whole lot of work done by a variety of different people. So the legislative, the analyst office, so the LAO, did a couple of different approaches for assessing how the revenue impact would be. You know, one was go ahead and it's going to do 85% of all new vehicles were going to be zero emission by 2045. And then they also did a combination of, let's go 65% of new vehicles purchased will be zero emission by 2045. And we're going to see an improvement in fuel efficiency of gas and diesel vehicles. And so there's a difference between those two, just in the amount of vehicles that are being used, as well as this fuel efficiency concept. And then over on the right-hand side of the table, it really is just saying, hey, associated with each one of those, so 85% all vehicles are ZEVs. It'll be about a $13.2 billion reduction in revenue over that 10-year period. And then it's about almost $30 billion for the approach where just 65% of the new vehicles, and then is an improvement in fuel efficiency. The needs assessment analysis that was done as part of Senate Bill 1121 took a look at adopting the CARB Advanced Clean Cars 2 fleet. Clean Cars 2 and the fleet, and we associated an improved fuel efficiency. So a little bit of a combination of what the LAO office did. And from this analysis, we said, hey, there's going to be about a $31.1 billion reduction in revenue. And then similarly, the Mineta Transportation Institute did a very large study where they had, I believe, 8 different approaches that went from, hey, we're not going to do anything different, we're going to stay status quo, to we're going to go to, you know, full zero emission vehicles with a fuel efficiency improvement option. And so there's this varied amount of analyses. But they in that analysis, they showed that there's going to be a range of about 6 to up to $30 billion reduction in revenue. So somewhere in there is going to be is where we actually are. And I think that's the kind of the interesting thing about trying to assess the revenue impacts. Will there be a revenue impact? Absolutely. But I think the challenge is moving forward is what is that impact going to be? And so we've got this range. We pretty much feel that somewhere between a $6 billion and a $30 billion reduction in revenue is probably likely. The only question is, where is that revenue reduction? Next slide, please. So this just takes everything that I just spent the last, I don't know, 15 minutes talking about and puts it onto kind of all into one slide. And so you can kind of see the transit, the asset and the need are on the left, the revenue sources is on the right. And so you can see that the total need over the 2025-2035 period is about $736 billion. But the revenue is only going to be 572. The estimated revenue is only 572. So next slide, please. So what does this mean? We're just taking the needs, taking the revenue. The shortfall between the needs and the revenue is $164 billion over that 10-year period. And then I just added the estimated revenue reduction as a kind of a little separate, just because it's not a firm number just yet. But it, again, you take that 164 as far as the shortfall goes, and it could be $170 billion shortfall, or it could be almost 200, depending on where that impact of the reduction in revenue from the ZEV actually lies. I think, Francis, it's back to you.
Thank you, Linda. Justin, next slide, please. I think I will pause Yeah, I will pause and I'll take questions. We'll take questions on the information that we just went over, any additional feedback you may have, comments. So Justin, I know we have one question in the Q&A box, and um, we can answer that one.
Okay, yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Francis. We did receive one written question during that time. Again, reminder, you can send questions in either in written form or you can use the raise hand feature and then we will call on you. This written question comes from Albie Dobson. They write, did the transportation needs capture needs from transit agencies such as SAC-RT or LA Metro? And what about passenger rail?
So, Albie, I think your question was answered in a slide right towards the end, maybe 2 slides prior to this. A lot of our transit agency needs or information that we did gather did come from the extended fiscal needs survey from the regional transportation plans, as well as the passenger rail needs coming from the state rail plan. I hope that answers your question. If not, please let me know. We also recognize that perhaps not like the transit information, while some of it is captured in the RTPs, there may be more information out there beyond that as we have been going through the report development process.
All right, thank you, Francis. We did receive an additional written comment from an anonymous attendee. They write, I might have missed this, but for the next meeting, could information be sent beforehand so we can better prepare for the meeting? Also, will the slide deck be shared?
Yes, the slide deck will be shared. We will post it after today's meeting, and I will send out to everyone that's registered for tomorrow's meeting the slide deck later this.
All right, thank you, Francis. Not seeing any other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, please don't be shy. Please do ask questions or follow up with us via email if nothing comes to mind. But in terms of the needs assessment delivery schedule, Justin, could you go to the next slide?
There we go.
So, just to recap what we've done thus far, we submitted the final interim needs assessment in January. We held our initial technical workshops in February, to talk about the information we gathered initially from the extended needs fiscal needs survey, and we've been working on that information and analyzing it for quite some time as we also developed the report. We held our 2 policy recommendations workshop where we gathered feedback from our stakeholders to help with the policy recommendation portion of this report. And we will have a work group meeting on October 1st, specifically on the feedback we got from the workshop. In terms of the draft needs assessment and work group meetings, we are holding 2 more tomorrow on October 1st, and with any additional meetings in the fall, and anticipating to release the draft needs assessment later this year. And we hope to finalize the needs assessment in the first quarter of 2025 and submit that to the legislature. So it's a pretty straightforward timeline as to when we're going to have the needs assessment released. So I'm going to stop here and pause for any additional questions. I think I saw one additional Q&A.
Yes, someone asked when are comments due?
So this is not the official report really draft release. So if you just have questions or comments, you can send it to us as soon as you want or can. I would say that it would be great to have any questions or comments, let's see, by the second week of October, if not earlier.
And then an additional written question came in from Jennifer Pullum, who asked, we've been refining our survey responses to give you better answers. Is this still needed?
Linda, I'm going to defer this one to you.
I don't think at this time we need anything. I think let me Jennifer, let me circle back and see if there's anything that we needed from you, and I'll reach out to you in a separate email. I think that's probably the easiest way to go.
We received one additional comment from Sarkis. He writes, "We definitely support being on the conservative side on the ZEV revenue impact."
Sarkis, question for you. Which conservative side? Or maybe I'll follow up with you on a separate conversation there.
Here, he's got his hand raised. I'm going to
Okay.
Unmute him now. All right, Sarkis, you're free to unmute and comment.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, the $30 billion figure, just making sure that we're capturing the biggest worst case scenario impact on the revenues.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure. I was like, you don't mean the $6 billion figure, correct?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarkis.
And then we received an additional written comment, comes from an anonymous attendee. They write, "How can we get an accurate depiction of what transit needs are when transit agencies, RTPAs, and many MPOs don't really engage the transportation planning process for transit? I believe that this may be because there is no funding dedicated to transit planning that is not discretionary. Maybe we need to better define who's responsible for transit planning at the local level and fund it."
Hi, thank you. So we have also been touching base with transit agencies in the state and going over some of the information that you saw here today, specifically on the transit side. And yeah, they brought forth to us that, we should be working a little more on trying to get information on the transit side. And we are currently looking at the cost of procurement, I think, in particular on the rolling stock, because I think some of the numbers to the transit agencies, to your point, looked a little low. But to your point, that has been a little bit of a challenge there as well. Laura, do you have anything to add or would like to add?
I would maybe just add that, we do look forward to continuing to work with CalSTA and their Transit Transformation Task Force and the resulting policy recommendations and information that come out of that process to better inform this assessment and the transit piece of it. And if we can, as Francis said, continue to build those relationships with the transit operators and continue to refine the information that we can put into this needs assessment for future iterations, definitely something we want to do. So thank you for the question and comment.
And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Linda, or Laura on any specific transit needs questions for the report here. Any other questions or hands raised, Justin?
Not seeing any others at this time.
I think we'll move to the next slide, please, Justin. So next slide. Nina, if you wanted to report out any of the sort of big wrap up or conclusions.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank everyone for participating and listening in on today's work group meeting. So this was the kickstart to a series of 3 meetings aimed at gathering input for the draft of the 2025 State and Local Needs Assessment in accordance to Senate Bill 1121. So today we provided an overview of some of the chapters from the needs assessment and had a focus on our transportation needs, revenue, and the gap analysis over the next 10 years. More specifically, we went over survey results we got back from our MPOs and our TPAs and the methodology on the revenue projection. I'd also like to remind everyone that our next work group meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, and that's going to be from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. That session will focus more on climate adaptation, active transportation, and accessibility. If you're interested in attending and learning about that, please make sure to register through the reminder that was sent to your emails, which also includes the registration link for the third meeting on October 1st. That will go over policy recommendations. And yeah, thank you once again for your contributions today. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, if you registered for tomorrow, I will send out the deck tonight. Oh, Siri, I can answer your question very quickly. As soon as we get it remediated, it will most likely post tomorrow or on Friday. Thank you.